Welcome to Amidon Planet. I'm your host, Joel Amidon. Thank you for joining me in this never-ending quest to learn how to teach better. Today, on episode 122 of the podcast, I'm joined by Allison DiLiberto. Allison is in leadership at an independent wealth management firm and also my sister-in-law. She got a shout-out during the Cal Newport Rolling in the Deep Work episode. Then she gave me another Cal Newport book. This time it was Slow Productivity, The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout. Rather than just giving her another shout out, I asked if she'd join me on the podcast as a birthday present to discuss the book. And 4 short months later, here we are. So we're going to discuss that book. Again, Slow Productivity, The Lost Art of Accomplishment by Cal Newport. And as always, when we discuss a book, we like to give the little disclaimer. Allison and I, we can't fully capture the value of the book, and even if we could, it would be from our perspective. So if you like what you hear, consider getting the book for yourself. I really think you will not be disappointed. Right now, the book is available on bookshop.org, a site dedicated to supporting local independent bookstores survive in the age of e-commerce. You can find a link in the show notes at amazonplanet.com/episode 122, where your purchase will help both local booksellers and the production of this podcast. All right, we have a great conversation. It's a pretty long conversation, so we're going to get right to it. Here is my conversation with Allison DiLiberto on Cal Newport's book, Slow Productivity, The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout. Allison. No, wait, let's try again. Allison DiLiberto, welcome to Amidon Planet. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation, Joel. I'm really excited to be here.
I actually don't think I call you Allison. I'm like Al.
Al.
Is what yeah.
Right.
And for those, yeah, exactly. You can call me out. Yeah, little Paul Simon in honor of SNL 50. Hey, we're family, but also you're one of the brightest people that I know, and so I'm thankful that you're coming on the podcast to talk. But for those that don't know, could you just share a little bit about yourself? And we'll obviously dive into family dynamics, and we could maybe do a ranking of family. No, we won't do that.
Oh,
but no.
that'd be so good. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't bore people with like how long I have known you and how you effectively raised me in some ways. But professionally, I'm the head of finance and operations at an independent wealth management firm. We provide investment advisory services, financial planning, and financial education to individuals and families. In my role here, I oversee the firm's back office functions, including finance, accounting, technology, administration, and talent. It's a dynamic role that requires balancing day-to-day operational needs of the firm while also driving long-term strategic initiatives. So I've been always interested in how we can work smarter, not just harder, to create meaningful impact in both business and life. And that's part of what drew me to Cal Newport's work, which we'll be talking about today.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited to talk to you about it.
Yeah. I was doing some reflection. So we're not to do the math, but exactly 10 years apart.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So when you graduated from high school is when I left my math teaching job. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that, actually.
Same exactly. So, and then when you started your career is basically when I started my career in higher ed here at the University of Mississippi. So I was like thinking about like why, we've kind of had some similar sort of, growth and changes in and it's like there is like this parallelism that's gone on and where you were in student leadership in your high school. Were you student leadership?
Yeah, class president.
Yeah, so
I don't advertise it. I don't advertise that. But
there we go. Yeah. But and I was working with our class president to do graduation and everything. He was very BJ Chrysler, shout out. And like all that sort of stuff, so like, again, all this parallelism happening on. And so I think too, when we're talking about some of these, every now and then, family functions or whatever, we'll dive into, whatever one of us is reading. Hey, have you heard about this? You heard about this? And it's like, there is like this parallelism, maybe this like sort of things going on where we're kind of going through some of the similar growth areas in our careers that we're thinking about these things from different perspectives, but also still a lot of productive ideas that are flowing.
Yeah, I actually, I was similarly reflecting on how we have come to share this information and how we have, existed in seemingly two very different industries, right? Education, and kind of professional services, wealth management, if you will, and how much of our stuff is transferable, transferable skills, figuring out how to, work effectively, get into this deep work. We encounter the same type of, roadblocks, distractions. It's been amazing to me and really valuable to me to be able to share that with you throughout my professional career and really my entire life.
Yeah. Well, let's dive in. So we were talking about slow productivity from Cal Newport, and just to get the full title, it's The Lost Art of Accomplishment Without Burnout is the subtitle. And you gave me this book after I finally did the Cal Newport book, which the Deep Work, and which kind of similar sort of structure, right? So, the way that he structures his books, I really like it. We'll go into that in a second. But then you're like, hey, heard the Deep Work episode. Here's this note. Why did you, what drew you to this book? And then also, why did you choose to give it to me?
Yeah, absolutely. So I picked up slow productivity because I had enjoyed Deep Work. And then I was invigorated, re-energized by your episode on Deep Work, and reminded me how meaningful that book was to me, and kind of how I think about my schedule and my day-to-day. That book specifically helped me recognize the importance of carving out kind of distraction-free time for strategic thinking. But slow productivity takes it a step further, kind of addressing how to sustain this meaningful work over the long run without falling into the trap of constant busyness. With my 3 young children at home, and a husband who has an incredible career, we are very much in this season of constant busyness. And so I picked it up with the hopes that it would get at least one little tidbit of some, applicable way of thinking to try to reduce what feels like a hamster wheel right now.
Yeah. No, there's lots going on. Yes, right. Lots going on.
And one other thought on that and why I picked it up. So I mentioned before, I kind of juggle a lot of different functions at my firm, which makes large strategic initiatives really difficult to move forward, right? And you're dealing with this operational stability and keeping the business going. And so these principles in the book that we're going to dive into, really like doing fewer things, working at a natural pace, and obsessing over quality. I hope no spoiler alert on how you're going to go into those principles, but they seem counterintuitive in an environment, I feel like mine, professional services, perhaps like you, education, where responsiveness is key. But really they are kind of reinforcing what makes for an excellent employment and a client experience. So I thought it could be super applicable to my day-to-day life, but also really impactful in my professional life.
Yeah. And I think, this kind of goes back to the purpose of this podcast too, is like bringing in some of these big ideas that are being talked about in other different areas. Obviously, Cal Newport talked about knowledge work, and we'll go into that, or cognitive work, whatever. And then, but even thinking about the ideas that you're doing within your firm, and then the things that we're doing here in higher ed and trying to train teachers and education, like there's, and even in the book, it talks about it, where he talks about being a cinephile is like cross pollinate in these different areas. Like you don't just go to, HR books or education books to learn how to become a better like you need to let's look around. There's great ideas everywhere. And so how do we do that? And this whole idea about bringing the humanity back to knowledge work, like that's at the heart of it. Like that's what I really loved about it, when it was, I think somewhere it was like beyond the economics, and it talks about to be overloaded is not just inefficient, it could be for many downright inhumane. And like thinking about how can we bring humanity into educate? How can we bring humanity into what you're doing to, we're people. We're not just, cogs, right? Not just cogs in a machine.
Totally. And in one portion of my job that I love and actually try to prioritize more than anything is creating an excellent employee experience at my firm. So talent is under my umbrella, but really driving that idea into our organization, how to make this kind of a humane experience, if you will, but really something that is an excellent employee experience, because those are things that, really do drive kind of the end game of an excellent client experience.
Yeah. the newest addition to the family, who's doing some things with AI and veterinary medicine. He was talking about, like, we were having a conversation, and he and Scott was saying about how they're trying to bring a humanity back to veterinary medicine. And it's like, like that, it was like one of the, like, what are the active things that we could be doing to do that, to bring humanity into whatever roles we are.
Right.
And so I think that's, at the heart of, well, it's what at the heart of what Cal Newport's doing here. Yeah. So, the framework of the book, again, similar to more others, is, a lot of these sorts of books is like, hey, there's a big argument, almost like a lit review, like, hey, slow productivity, we need to be doing it, and here's all the reasons why. And then having principles, just like he had in Deep Work, he has these principles: do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality. And so, again, and then he elaborates in lots of different anecdotes and examples and research, and does a really good job with that. And so thinking about this, and then going into talk about this idea of like learning to practice, and some key takeaways from the book that apply to teaching. And in giving you these questions, I know sometimes I'm dealing with educators, but I believe you're an educator as well, because you're a parent, but then also too, you're educating people within what you're doing. And I define teaching as any actions taken by someone to influence another's relationship with content. So before you get into maybe some of your takeaways, what does teaching look like in your roles?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I oversee a team of people who all are responsible for different functions, and then responsible for overseeing their direct reports. Plus, I have a seat in the firm that I feel very fortunate to have, which is kind of overseeing the overall talent. And that could include, figuring out training and development, or onboarding process, or how they integrate into the firm. But basically, getting involved deeply with the employee experience. One of my other favorite parts of my job is kind of leading our management team. So teaching managers the skills that you're not necessarily born with. They're not inherent as a human. You're really good at your function, but managing people is a whole different game. And so over the last couple of years, I've implemented, a monthly management team meeting where we really step away from our day-to-day operational roles and talk about what makes a good manager, how to give feedback, how to give hard feedback, how to have an effective one-on-one, how to really show up well for your team so that they come to you and you are the first to hear about challenges rather than going to the rest of the organization. And so much of what I learned in field productivity really does translate into content that I would share in that room.
Nice. So we talk about being a teacher educator. You're like a manager educator. And then also too, we both share the common role of being parents, where we're teaching every single, even sometimes when I'm in my bad moments, I'm like, wow, I'm just teaching them to raise their voice.
Right. I'm teaching them to be a yeller, or maybe you're teaching them not to be, right? They're like, I won't parent like that.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Good luck.
Yeah. I mean, but also, thinking about being the intentionality that you put behind those sorts of roles, and I've seen how you do that. And how do we kind of bounce off ideas off of each other in that realm? Like in the chaos, how do we do this as well as we can? And so again, some of these principles apply there as well. All right, let's dive into some of these ideas.
All right.
So you want to go first?
I've got a lot to talk about. So sure. I'll kick it off. So overarching theme that you touched on is this humane nature of the work. We are not trying to squeeze every ounce of productivity. I feel very strongly after both my work at Chicago Booth to get my MBA, and then spending a lot of time in alternative asset management and financial services overall. I really have come to believe that there is a high value in effectively managing an organization where you're not just churning through talent. So this human component and treating people as humans, and the whole human, and understanding that people have so much more than just work going on in their day-to-day life. But so let's not burn them out, right? That's not actually the best outcome for the organization. It's incredibly costly to have that turnover. So the human piece is definitely the overarching. But then I started to get into some of these really interesting ideas about the autopilot schedule. I loved that idea. Setting up kind of structure around how we have predictable routines, rituals and locations, and how we kind of set time aside for those things. That's something I hadn't really thought about over time. I actually, our CEO here is incredible, and she has been a phenomenal coach to me throughout my time here. And one thing she said when I first started was like, start blocking your schedule. Okay, this day you're going to work on this type of work, because I had so many functions. I'm like, I can't keep with this all straight. She's like, start blocking. And so I started to do that. But this autopilot schedule is kind of taking it to another level, like really dedicating at the same time every week. And this is what you're going to do. And this is when you know. So you can kind of set that on the kind of back burner when it's not at the forefront.
Yeah. I like that too. I mean, so like we talk about that with teachers, like you can have a structured schedule. And so that then there's, and not to be boring, right? But that so for my class, like the class I'm currently teaching, they're teachers that are they're pre-service teachers learning how to first teach. And so on Thursdays, we always do this thing called teaching groups. There's lots of episodes, previous episode on the Amazon Planet podcast where we talk about it, where it's like this short little, they get to teach a little 10-minute lesson to their peers. But every Thursday that happens. So to prepare for them on Tuesday, there's we have a little mock professional learning community where those teachers talk to me. And while the other students in the class are working with my GA on their units that they're planning to, but like there's these blocks that are definitely going to be there. And even for students, like in a first grade classroom or kindergarten, I'm sure that, your daughter's got there's some routines to the schedule and there's calendar time and all that. So there's like this calm that can come over, but you can still be creative within those blocks, but there's still there's some predictability, some routine, and like, I know what to expect. And so, and that, I don't know, there's something about that is like reassuring, for me. It's reassuring for me because I know what I'm doing each week, but also for my students, they know what to expect. Right.
Totally. And to take it out of your brain of like, you have this unending to-do list.
Right.
And I have found that having that space is like, okay, this comes into my brain for 3 seconds. And then I remember, I've got that time carved out on Monday. That's when I'll hit this. Yeah. And then it goes. It's already in that space. I love that example he gave of, I think the college student who's like, I'm going to go home, 3 days in advance and start working on that problem set. Said no one ever. But having the time, you're always going to work after this class. You work on that class specifically, and you're carved out time. I mean, that resonated so well with me.
Yeah. The worst time to do something later. When is later? Yeah, later doesn't actually exist.
Right. Totally. Another thing he talked about too that landed really well was this overhead tax. And I don't think I've ever put a word on it. And I think that word is going to be stuck in my arsenal for a very long time to come. When I look at my week or my month, quarter, year, I look at the things that I want to get done, these big, meaty projects. And I'm like, I could do all these things. And what I have done a poor job, both professionally and personally, of like estimating the actual amount of time that overhead tax takes, that like admin, the meetings, the check-ins, the agenda setting, the prep that goes into having a conversation, not just the work. And so when going into a project or any sort of initiative, at the outset, thinking about what that looks like and how much time you want to allocate to that is, I think, going to be a really meaningful exercise. That was a I thought, really unique way to capture that piece of kind of this unseen work, that load.
Well, and like that kind of thing of you saying yes to that. What are you saying no to because you're saying yes to this? Right. And whether it's, a time for other projects at work or time away from family, like, I got on a board and I was like, ooh, that board is going to meet in person. So it's not just, like there's all these days and times it's going to be like away, and like, am I willing to pay that? Is my family willing to pay that? Because it's not just me having to pay that, right? It
takes a lot of people to make all of these commitments work.
Yeah. Right. I wanted to go back to that humanity piece too. And again, it's the overall theme of the book, but so maintaining the humanity of teaching, again, point back to the goal of the book, but then in the definition of knowledge work, right? He talks about the economic activity in which knowledge is transferred into an artifact with market value through the application of cognitive effort. So one, is teaching just transferred knowledge work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right,
like,
right.
knowledge is
A little bit of
transformed.
inception going on here, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like, thinking about like in that knowledge is transformed into an artifact. It's like that artifact is being delivered into somebody else. Like now
Mm-hmm.
I have the ability to teach. Now I have the ability, for my, teacher educate or ability to manage. Like when they're going through your professional development, now all of a sudden, like individuals that, are just maybe have taken on the title of manager and now have the skills, abilities, the knowledge, like these artifacts, they're collecting artifacts, right?
Right.
For that. And so, we're just lately, I'm just noticing more and more, as I'm around other, smarter teacher educators, and they talk about like, what do we teach? Those like I teach teacher education, or I teach mathematics or whatever, things about what I teach. And like more and more people are reminding us, I teach people, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
teaching people to do this. Because when you like, if you think about it from this definition of knowledge work, like, and you think about I'm transferring knowledge into someone else, like it's more about what am I carrying over to this person versus no, who am I carrying this stuff to? And then
Yes.
how I deliver it is, and how do I teach has to be a response to this person. And like, again, bringing back the
How are they
humanity
going
of
to
it.
receive it,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So there are so many parallels, I think, in education and professional services. So, I'm not just in any business where we produce widgets and I'm, running a factory over here. My widgets, the equivalent of that is people.
Mm-hmm.
And you are working, to bridge a gap between managers and the people that they're managing, and also the information transfer of the actual work we do. So we have all of these different avenues for data information to be sent and received. Yet, so yes, I see so many similarities in what you described and how you think about kind of teaching educators. It's a nuanced art of knowledge work, I think, specific area.
Yeah, because I imagine like when you have folks coming in with different perspectives and different experiences, right? And
Yeah.
like how am I going to like you can't just again plug and play the same stuff.
No, right.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many pieces in coming to an organization, particularly like ours, right? You've got systems that have been in place that might look very different from where they came from. You've got, people who have just different experiences and have to learn, different ways of thinking.
Yeah.
But I feel very strongly about the value of transferable skills. So how you have shown in knowledge work, critical thinking, problem solving, your ability to be agile or resilient, really, will serve you well in this space. And I think that this kind of idea of knowledge work around that, or that surrounding perhaps the idea of knowledge work, those skills and kind of working on those skills makes you really, really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So that was did you have another one to jump into?
I did. I had one more, and I have a few more, but I have one
I'm
specific
sure you have many
more.
more.
No,
Yeah.
I know. This book it spoke to me. But this one about seasonality.
Yeah.
And so teachers in education,
Right.
you kind of have this built-in seasonality, which is awesome in some ways. But I know you, at least, and I'm guessing many others, who listen to this, are stuffing those seasons, that might be off with other work. I don't think I've ever seen you in an off season, but I have seen you make time to write and prioritize that work. But in my world, oftentimes it doesn't feel like seasonality. It feels like you're just grinding all the time. Because there's no shortage of work to do.
Yeah.
So we don't have that natural, and Newport talks about this, like, okay, if you're in a business, like it might not have these natural breaks, and it might feel hard to take that seasonality. So really what I kind of came to is it doesn't have to be like 3 months or 2 weeks even. It really can be, okay, it's a day, or I'm taking, this afternoon, kind of reframing. And I think the responsibility is on the individual to really frame that seasonality and find out what works for you and what is kind of the season. And when you're in the season, acknowledging that it is a season, because it's very easy to say, wow, I'm in it and I'm always busy. But actually, if you zoom out, maybe to the last quarter, to the last, year, there are maybe spaces where you did have that seasonality, or you could have inserted that seasonality. But I think there is often a narrative, particularly in professional services, that you're grinding. And finance and accounting is a big one, right? Where it just feels like we're on all the time. But if you do really frame that there are busy seasons and there are lulls, and your lulls might, they are a valley compared to your peak. Yeah. And so acknowledging that, and in changing the narrative in your head from I'm just grinding all the time to like, this is a busy season, it'll end, I'm going to move on. And yeah, it's going to come back around, but I'm going to make the most of those, kind of peaks and valleys.
Yeah. Well, and also, just thinking about it I got teenagers and activities. I'm going to have 3 teenagers in about a week. Mm-hmm. Holy cow. No, 2 weeks. Yeah, it's a lot. But the helping them see that, right? And like, hey, you're not getting a lot of extra time for stuff because commitments we made with activities and holidays and other things that are family stuff's going on. Yeah, like there's gonna be, but here, okay, now we have this time. All right, well, how do we want to use this space and time? Like, what are the things that you can do to develop? And so, helping, and also too, seeing my student teachers right now, knowing that, hey, you're going to have a really tough, like the senior block, it's their fall of their senior year is always hectic. And so I always bring in, have my grad assistant who's gone through that and like, hey, how did you manage it? How did you do these things? How did you help out? Because that's going to be a tough season. But then also too, to prepare yourself for the next season where there's going to be applying for jobs and whatever, but also getting more experience teaching and to speak to those. And so I think that those seasonality, but then also thinking about how are you, again, embracing who you are as a person and giving yourself space to do the things that you need.
Right. And that self-talk of like, that actually super valuable. If you tell yourself you're miserable and in a grind every day when you wake up, you're going to feel miserable and in a grind. Yeah. Saying, okay, this is tough today and I'm going to call it my reality. That's real. But knowing that you will get out of it, and telling yourself you're going to get out of it and it is just a season, I think it's immensely helpful.
So this was something weird that came up when I was reading through this book and coming to this idea of this seasonality or like even micro seasons. My 7th grade teacher, Mr. Elrod, 7th grade math, on Friday we would color. We would listen to Lake Wabagon. Do you even know who that is? Garrison Keillor.
But could you do some little rendition for me?
It was about a town in Minnesota. And like the stuff that was happening around town, and Garrison Keillor did a radio play, and he would read through like what would happen. And like like I think Garrison Keillor might have had, I don't know. We put a link in the show. There's a reason why it's not around anymore. Anyway,
sure, right.
But we listen to that and we color these like math, like Escher type puzzle, and because I think now like other people have on Fridays, like a lot of my kids even they have tests and assessments on Fridays versus like we ended with coloring and like it was like, man, I have a positive view of what's going on in math class. Like I got some awesome coloring done. With
going into the weekend, you are riding high, so you're ready to come back on Monday morning. Yeah,
that's right.
Totally,
that's right.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So I had one where the whole idea about the doing fewer things, I think, is just that's one of the principles, but just that idea. And I was thinking about the ahas that some of my students are having right now when they're doing these little mini lessons. They're trying to, it's only 10 minutes. So they're trying to shove so much into 10 minutes versus they come to the aha of like doing fewer things. So for example, I'm going to give you a math problem.
Yeah.
26 plus 15 is what?
41.
41. All right. Now, if we were in something where we're thinking about depth of knowledge being just, can you recall a fact? Al, you got an A+. Good job. Versus, hey, how did you get that?
Yeah.
I'm serious. How
did I get there? I started with the ones and then I went, to the tens.
Okay. So like standard algorithm, kind of?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I actually, it's like, okay, well, first I was like, I can't get this wrong because I did say I'm in charge of finance here. And if I got that wrong, that'd be really embarrassing.
Yeah.
But no, I thought about, actually, I to be honest, I broke it down. I said, okay, well, what's 10? There's 10. And then there's another 5. So let's get, 26 plus 10, 36, another 5. It's like breaking it down into small pieces.
Okay. Yeah. So you added the 10, added the 5. Well, and then, so like, if we would go around the room of maybe do a stand and deliver where everybody stands up and people that have similar thinking. So maybe someone that's did what you did, the 10 and the 5, they'd all sit down and then, hey, okay, what else do people do? And somebody might say, well, I would just take one away from the 26, get it to 25. I know 25 and 15 is 40. Put that one back on, get 41. Or else someone, does a standard algorithm more that 5 plus 6 is 11, carry the 1, they kind of imagine that in their head. Or else another kid might be like, I'm going to add 4 on to the 26 to get to 30. And now I have 11 left, like all these different things. So like, we're only getting through one problem. Right. But we're talking about all these, we're just asking the different questions about how'd you get it? What's your thinking process? What are the different ways? Maybe we can even categorize these different ways of thinking about it. And this whole idea of like less is more. Like now we did one problem, but we got really deep into process. And now kids are hearing, wow, my way of doing it is not only is being acknowledged and honored. And now I want to maybe come up with other creative ways to do it. Now we're thinking like we're thinking more rather than just the production of, can I get an answer?
Result, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The flashcard answer,
Totally. Yeah. I think about that a lot in just reps, like getting reps in any of the work I do, like more opportunities to exercise this muscle and whatever it might be, management, education, teaching, makes me better the next time. And having that kind of mindset about working through that. And really it's more focused, on the process to get there and less on the actual outcome.
Well, because I'm curious about like if you're, embracing this and like thinking about if you're slowing down within, being a manager educator, like if you have an opportunity to not only do that sort of thing and get to hear the thinking of those that you're working with, I bet you learn some things that have then changed what you do, right?
100%. Absolutely. And particularly in the room that we have, we've got managers of several different functions, some of which I'm closer to than others, right? And so there are pieces of our business that I didn't have experience with when I first started. I came from a background in finance. And so when I started taking over technology and more of the kind of talent functions, I got experience with those, listening to how people think about things. But then there are functions at our business that I don't necessarily touch, like performance reporting, and hearing how they approach a problem, similar to what you described, very different way. We might have the same feedback we may need to deliver, but they will approach it in a different way. And yes, that's a great opportunity, which is why those kind of round tables become so valuable in our learning experience. Because if you're really listening and you're starting to kind of untangle how people are doing things, you can take a lot away from that.
And tapping into the excellent things that people are bringing to the table versus like, no, do it this way and this.
Totally. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And honestly, sometimes people say, just tell me how to do it. I want to do it. And I'm like, that's not what this is. That's not the intention of our discussion in the group. It is not my meeting where I'm telling you how to do things. It is a meeting where we are coming together to create a space where you feel comfortable talking to your peers about how they do things and how they learn about them. I'm here predominantly as a facilitator.
Well, maybe that's even to tap into that final principle about the obsessing over quality, right? Yes. Like, because if you really didn't care, like, execute at this, do this and produce this, right? Versus like, no, I'm guessing that we could probably do this better, and let's get input from everyone to better and again, taking advantage of people's expertise and things that people are doing, because there's nothing worse. Like, and I'm sure you've seen this too, of you're sitting there and someone's telling you how to do something. You're like, I know how to do that better. Just ask the question, or like, I know how to do that better. And actually I know Jim knows how to do it even better than me, or like all these sorts of things that let's open it up so that we can contribute, because we've got things to share.
Totally. And yes, this quality, like we all have, for at least in our business, the client experience at the tip top of our mind, right? We want the best, most excellent client experience that we can provide. And so if everybody has that same objective, but everybody has kind of different ways to get there, we all know and we can align on the idea that we're reaching the same target or objective. And so that gives you some trust in hearing what everybody else has to say, and knowing that is their intention. You can learn and they can be vulnerable. And this is how I do it. Maybe it's not the best way, but I'm open to knowing what is the best way. But aligning on the fact that we are all working toward the same objectives creates a a space much more conducive to sharing those ideas.
Yeah. I almost wanted to take that, what you just said, maybe I will, and just cut it out and then just replace client with student, right?
Yes, yes,
Or pre-service
yes.
teacher. I mean, like,
Right.
and and you know, that's one of the things we talk about with our students when we talk about behavior management. Like when you're talking to a parent, like you all want the same goal, right?
Yeah.
You all
Right.
want the best possible experience for this child or this,
Yeah.
you know, or thinking about pre-service for this
Uh-huh.
pre-service, like how can we accomplish that, right? In
Mm-hmm.
better ways. And so it's good.
Totally.
It's good.
Totally.
You have anything else with the learning to practice sort of section here?
Nope.
All
I
right.
think we nailed it. Yeah.
Okay. So now you know. So after reading this book, either what have you done differently or what do you want to do differently? You got anything for that?
Yeah. So I would say the big thing there are a couple things, but the one of the primary things I'm going to take away is something that the education world's already figured out. The office hours concept. Kind of coupled with this docket cleansing sessions or docket cleaning sessions. I can't remember exactly what you called them. But it is so often distracting to get one-off questions. And I never want to stand in the way of my team getting their work done. And so I make myself available. But it's hard. And sometimes I'm not available and I'm in back-to-back meetings and they don't know when they're going to get me. And so there is more of a fire drill to ping me and say, hey, can you answer this question? But implementing this idea of like structured office hours, okay, every day from like 4 to 4:30, hit me up. You know I'm available. I'm going to make myself available and we'll chat. And then across the team, these docket cleaning sessions, right? Like giving a space for everybody else to bother the rest of the team.
Yeah.
That feels
permission. Yeah.
Yeah, permission. And I've kind of done that in some way. It's a bi-weekly meeting with my whole team, and I say, okay, I'm going to share with you to provide transparency what I'm working on, because some of you have an idea because I'm working on with some of you. Some of these projects don't involve any of you, so I'm again trying to provide transparency here. But this time together every 2 weeks, it probably should be more frequently, is really so you can ask, oh wait, that's happening. So how does that impact me? And what am I going to need from you? And oh, we're talking about that thing that makes me think I need this other thing. Getting the group together to kind of clean off those items in a very kind of targeted way, I think will be so helpful.
Yeah. No, and I had some notes written down about that same exact thing. Ann and I, Ann, she's been on the podcast.
Wonderful.
Great person. But we have a weekly session. We used to do a lot of research together. We still do some research together, but then now this has just become our project space. So we call it the Bat Cave. She's Batman, I'm Robin, and we get stuff done. And we've gotten some student-centered summits done. We've done some mentoring, like all these programs, like professional development, like things. And all we do is meet for an hour, and like we'll block it off for an hour. Most times we don't need the whole thing. We'll record podcast episodes for our Road to Better Teaching. Like it's like just having that. What they call is a duo, that other thing where we're just, and we've got a list, you go to a list, she'll go to her list, and I'll just bam, 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 check things off. Same thing working with doc students too, is as soon as I know I'm chairing and they're moving into like proposing and dissertating or whatever, like we have a 15-minute Zoom every week.
Yeah.
We might not need it, but let's get in. Hey, I'm supposed to read this, need you to do X and Y, and what, any questions? And it's just such a reassuring to know it's there, right? I'm going to touch base with them, because if I don't touch base with them, like they might be, intimidated, right? Like you're saying, permission. It's permission to ask, like, hey, I'm wondering, like, would this be a good thing to look into? Oh, yes, absolutely. And here's 3 other things that go along with that. It's those, Culture Code by Daniel Boyle.
Oh.
It's they talk about productive collisions. It's basically like you're facilitating these productive collisions because, we're smarter together, right?
Which actually brings me to the next point, which is becoming, those productive collisions are so much harder in a hybrid world, remote or hybrid. And I'm a huge proponent of hybrid work. Like I like that quiet space. And in fact, I think a big proponent in some ways because it allows me to carve out time for deep work. My office is right outside the kitchen at our firm. And so I get wonderful, wonderful drop-ins. But it is really hard to, kind of put my head down for any extended period of time, which I do love. But so a hybrid schedule for me allows like some targeted time. But that means that the productive collisions have to be a little bit more intentional.
Yeah.
And so creating those rituals around those productive collisions I found to be super helpful. But that also kind of to build on that, one of the other now I know coming out of that is what I maybe didn't want to totally give airspace to, but is so true, is this idea of stepping away from kind of your day-to-day space to really have productive work.
Yeah.
Like I said, big proponent of hybrid work, but working from home can be hard. And really to get into deep work. I'm not talking about taking Zoom calls or meetings. Yeah, you can do that at home because you can kind of focus in.
Yeah.
But when I need to get stuff done, go to the library, step outside, creating that location or that, kind of third space to really kind of dive into that project work is something I have found helpful when I've done it, but it's something I'm going to prioritize going forward after this book.
Yeah. No, specifically like I like either being on a plane or in a coffee shop that doesn't have Wi-Fi, where it's like, hey, I can't, I'm not going to keeping the phone away. Not going to check you. I'm plowing away at some project in order to get it done, and
absolutely.
You need those sorts of things, right?
Yeah. Right. I mean, as much as you want to, disconnecting from all of the things you need to do on the task list at home, it's really hard to step away from.
Yeah. And one thing that the $50 notebook thing, I don't know if you saw that. It was like the obsessing over quality.
Yeah.
My one of my initial professors in my doc program, Vicki Hand at the University of Colorado at Boulder, she said, get yourself a sketchbook. Take your notes in the sketchbook. Because one, all your notes for all your classes, take them in a sketchbook. And I have a series of sketchbooks. And it was like, she's saying they're all going to be connected, right? You're all thinking about the same project. All these courses are leading towards this one thing. So document it like you're, documenting, like you are a documentarian, right?
Yeah.
And like you're on your path, and like have a page dedicated to the research questions you want to investigate. And one of them will be your dissertation doc, which it was, so it was like, it was pretty cool. Like in honoring your work, right? If you are going to put time and effort and your humanity into it, honor it. And that's, one way you could, maybe it doesn't need to be 50.
I love that. And actually I was thinking about that concept I love this type of book. I read a variety of different genres, but nonfiction for me, some of the stuff is really interesting to me. And I find that it's hard to go back and grasp these content. So I was thinking actually about the $50 notebook in a way that is something that's always on me when I'm listening to this stuff, to jot down these thoughts. I have disparate notes in my iPhone, and they're sprinkled here and there, and I never go back to them. But having that central location, I mean, there were multiple times that I was reading this book and was like, because I did switch between modalities there. I found I'm like, I want to write this down so I can remember it for later, where I want to implement it. And so having that kind of centralized location, because I think a lot of these ideas do tend to build upon each other.
Yeah.
When you take the time for deep work.
Exactly. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to want to do differently instead of thinking in the future is this the idea of the pull-in philosophy. So rather than, things getting piled up and pushed into your world versus like, no, I've got projects. I've got this like queue of projects, and I'm going to, as I have time, as one gets cleared off, I can pull in another one, or, pull in, I think you said 3 simultaneously. And even thinking about that from a teaching perspective. And I just have the imagination of a teacher's desk piled up with great things to grade, versus everything doesn't need to be graded. And that's another conversation. Actually, I'm going to have Josh Eiler on to talk about grading in general. So that's going to be a future episode. And
excellent.
Hopefully we've had some rescheduling issues. Mostly my fault. Anyway, but just thinking like, well, what, this thing is important. I want to look at it and give feedback, but if all this other stuff's ahead of it, like only pulling in this, prioritized work in order to pull it in, or for in higher ed, like have all these sorts of projects I want to do, but it's like, okay, well, there's only, so much of you to go around, and knowing, and honoring your time, and like, okay, we're going to do this one next. We're going to do this one next. We're going to propose at this conference. We're going to apply for this grant. We're going to, rework this class, so those, that idea of the pull-in philosophy that he really fleshes out, does a good job of fleshing out.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
I like that.
even being able to zoom out and look at what that cue looks like and prioritize that cue so you know kind of what's on there to pull in and when like being honest with yourself on when that can actually happen. Yeah, I thought that framework was really helpful.
Yeah, and it probably, I mean, if you can focus in on something rather than trying to do 1,000 things, you probably are going to be quicker about doing things if you're more, deliberate about that.
Totally.
One other thing I like, and is something that I want to get back to, I used to do this, naming your groups. So like they had the I can't remember, it was the was it Token and who else? Lion Witch in the Wardrobe. Gosh. No, I can't remember. Yeah.
I'm not going to go here.
Oh my gosh.
Cannot.
Yeah. I'm getting old. All right. Anyway, but like that idea of like naming your group, I like that. So like, Ann and I have the Bat Cave. Like I was like,
yes.
What do we do in the Bat Cave? We get stuff done. And it's like, having that sort of, kind of that spirit about you. Like it's
like some sort of camaraderie. And yes, totally. I like that a lot. My management team doesn't, that name, that group needs a different name. I think something a little bit more inspiring, right? So they feel like they're part of like a cool collective, right?
Oh, the cool collective. There you go.
Yeah,
right. So getting into the getting critical. So what would be the major critique or major critiques of the book?
I think this book I found particularly valuable. I think you did too. And he acknowledges that maybe the shortcoming is where you have autonomy in your role. And because I was trying to get down to like my challenge with it is like, how do you, and how do I share this with my team in a way that like roles who are, exclusively doers and have task lists versus kind of getting into management and then at the highest level of management, what is realistic? Like this idea that you're going to split your time 50% meetings and 50% work. I'm like, ooh, that is optimistic. But I'm going to be working a lot more hours in the week if I'm going to get to that. But then I really tried to kind of untangle what is the root of that. And I think it really is autonomy over your schedule and how you need to show up for the people in your ecosystem. And that, again, I think he acknowledges that there's some of that and he tries to compensate like, you don't need to tell people this is what you're doing, but you're going to do it. But I think if I'm taking that and translating it and teaching it out, there's a lot more work to be done to figure out how it's applicable at different levels of autonomy.
Yeah. And my thing was that last principle, which is obsessing over quality as an Enneagram 1 perfectionist, which I think even Ian Crone has changed perfectionist into improver, but it's like, I would never get a podcast out if I, it was like to push it out into the world. Like, no, it's not perfect. Okay, whatever. We're going to,
I think that's actually something I've had to really come to terms with, in terms of getting things moving is not like, perfect is the enemy of good kind of, which I struggle to say because I do obsess over quality and I want it to be right. But perhaps there's some, variation between 198% that I'm willing to tolerate, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's that, like your boss talked about, like blocking your time. Like, hey, I know in 2 hours I can create whatever this thing is, or, I can do the job and like, yes, will it be perfect? No. But it's going to be darn good if I do commit this time and completely commit to it. So, awesome. So as a manager educator and a heck of a parent, what's the best thing you've learned lately to help you teach better?
Wow. I would say the best thing I've learned is to, really try to understand where somebody is and meet them where they are. This goes everywhere from, my managers with incredibly full plates and, immense to-do lists that they can't get through. And so, prioritizing how to be a better manager is not at the top of their list, to my 5-year-old whose emotions, are irrational in the kindest way. And so trying to meet them where they are, getting at their level, wherever it might be, has been helpful. I'm not going to say that I'm incredibly effective with it, but that constant reminder of, okay, like you just telling at them is not teaching them. It's really working it through with them.
No,
I mean, that's maybe cliche, but I do really think that meeting them where they are is, and remembering that is been immensely helpful.
Yeah. Well, I'm finding like that I need to I'm trying to do better about in my mind over communicating, which for me is my typical like level of communication is probably under communicating.
Sure.
And so, because I don't want to waste people's time, but like I need to over communicate in a lot of times to just make sure that people are on the same page and things like that. And also too, just with my students who are, they're taking risks in like some of the teaching and things that they're trying to do. And they're for the first time. And so it's like, basically like acknowledging like, hey, you just did something that was pretty hard. Like you did this topic, you did this thing, you tried this strategy. Yeah, it didn't go perfect, but you did more today than maybe another teacher that did, like you acknowledge and celebrate. And so making sure that they see what I see. And so being an over communicator,
totally.
Because sometimes I'm just too quiet, but it's okay. Which is weird for someone that has a podcast.
Right. No. I totally get that. That resonates. I think I've said those things in my head. Like I've told you about step, 1 through 5. And then I start at 6 and they're like, nope.
Yeah.
Okay. Over communication.
All right. Final thing. What is one album you love to listen to? So I know you got the vinyl record player in the house now. And so I'm very proud of you for that.
We do.
Mudroom Records right down the road.
Great.
So
down in Glen Ellen. It has become one of our rituals to have dinner at our dining room table. Oftentimes let the kids select the album that they want to put on for dinner.
Nice.
They basically do on color because they can't read. So whatever the flashiest album cover is, Guardians of the Galaxy often wins.
Perfect.
Great album, but that's not the one I was going to share, but it is a good one. The album that I love to listen to is Ray Charles, Genius Love Company. So, tidbit, Tony and my wedding song is on there, Crazy Love collaboration, which is fantastic. But the album in its entirety is an incredible collaboration that blends different styles and artists. And it just brings such a unique feel while staying still true to, Ray Charles and his signature sound. But I love it because kind of what we've talked about today, it is a good reminder of blending perspectives and expertise really can create something incredibly special.
What a way to end the podcast. Holy cow. Nice. Just fade to black. There we go.
Fade to black.
Good job. Thank you so much, Al, for taking time out of your busy day.
It was really, truly an honor. To be in the likes of some of these people you've had on here, but also share an hour with you has been magical.
It's a good excuse. It's a good excuse for a conversation. It's great. Yeah.
Great. It's great. No, I really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. So glad that we had that conversation. So glad we get an opportunity to share that conversation. Thinking about all the conversations I've had with Allison and with the rest of her family over holiday dinners, weekend dinners. I mean, even going back to when she was a teenager and thinking about just the conversations that I was exposed to when I joined that family. And it was unique. So typically there'd be like a dinner and you have the dinner and then conversations happening. But then when dinner's over, I would say like, hey, it's time to get up, clean up, and maybe we'll move to the couch. But no. We stay at the table. We stay at the table. Conversation keeps happening. And we're talking. And then another topic comes in. Then maybe someone comes over and they join and they offer a topic. And then the conversation just keeps going. And I have to tell you, I'll be honest, I had to adjust to that. That was just not a practice I was familiar with. But it's something that I love that's a part of now the fabric of that family. And now it feels like we're bringing it into part of my family. And just the idea of connection, face-to-face conversation. I think Cal Newport would like that, right? And also that, I guess that leads into, we're going to get into the mailbag in just a second, but just I'm get kind of reflective right now and just really thankful that family practice is something that I was introduced to. And thankful that Allison was able to come on, have a conversation, and now that we get to share with you all. All right, on to the mailbag. we had a couple submissions to the mailbag. So Kendall was just excited that we were doing this book because there was responding to the Amazon Planet Dispatch. And so she would mention that excited to listen to this episode. And Kendall, I hope we didn't disappoint it. And then Cal Newport's new book is called Digital Minimalism. And she is excited about digital minimalism, about focus, attention, etc. She's been thinking about that a lot. And she wondered if I'd heard about the light phone. And I had not heard about the light phone, but I looked it up. It looks kind of amazing. And I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But really, it's kind of an intentional device where you just get what you need on it. So I'm excited about it. I'm excited to hear what Kendall has to say about it. Maybe, and also too, I did buy Cal Newport's new book, Digital Minimalism. So maybe that's a future episode. Maybe Kendall would want to join me and talk about her light phone. That would be interesting. So let's see if she listens to this and connects with me on that. Another mailbag contribution from Paul. He asked, what do you think is the most effective thing that new co-teacher partnerships need to do? And also, he'd be curious for more co-teaching content. So we had the episode with Bethany LaValle and Alice Steinley about their article about the mathmates, where they talk about co-teaching between a special educator and a math educator. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well, that previous episode. But anyway, going back to Paul's question about what do you think is the most effective thing that new co-teacher participants need to do, I'd say is build the relationship. And I think that goes for any place where you're going to be teaching, is to building a relationship, right? And so thinking about if we're going to be working together as a unit in order to teach, one, we need to have a great relationship because we need to be thinking about how do we best use the gifts we have been each given to best serve our students, right? And so thinking about a relationship with the content and a relationship with the students, like we might each, between the two of us have a great relationship with the students, but they might have differing relationship with the content because maybe this co-teaching relationship is someone between someone knows the content a little bit better, someone knows maybe the practice a little bit better. I could think of some of the professional development opportunities that my friend Ann Monroe and I have offered together, where she's got, I've got the math content and maybe some other ways of producing the presentation better, versus she's got she's got a lot of personality, but then she also has a lot of expertise in shame and how teachers can work to reduce shame and all that. So, but that expertise and knowledge of what each and other brings comes from developing the relationship. And sometimes that can be a place where, I remember when I was teaching at Stock Prairie High School, where all of a sudden, my class is starting, and not only do I have my, 28 students coming in the door, also might have a couple either co-educators, special educators, teaching assistants that are coming in to help serve some of the students that were in my classroom. And so that'd be a surprise. Like, hey, well, my name is Joel. Nice to meet you. And so what do you do to build that relationship? And again, it's making intentional time to have that conversation, be like, hey, what do you feel comfortable doing? If we're in a math classroom, sometimes there's some trepidation about, putting themselves out there. So I really think having a structured way of developing a relationship and to consider what is it going to look like, sound like, feel like, what are the norms that we're going to commonly share around the classroom, the logistics of it. Like, how is this going to look when we step into the room together, and not have that, hey, day one and now we're trying to develop a relationship, versus like, no, we know exactly what we're doing going in. And I think when Bethany and Alice talked about co-teacher partnerships in a previous episode, like they're really talking about like when you step into the classroom and there's this kind of structure is happening, you don't really know who's a teacher of record and who might be coming in to support other students, right? And so those are something to really strive for. But I have to believe that it has to start with building a relationship, building that co-teaching relationship, so that then you're more effective with building a relationship with your students and helping those students develop a relationship with the content. There you go. So, and just, building those ground rules. So now time for the album, the episode. I'm be honest, this is where I'm sharing an album I've been listening to as a way to connect with you, the listener, but I just want to talk about music. This one I want to talk about is Let It Bleed by the Rolling Stones. It is, it's one of those things where it feels stupid to say it, but like the Rolling Stones, guess what? They're good. They are good. And this album has Give Me Shelter on it. It has You Can't Always Get What You Want. Country Honk, which is like a countrified version of Honky Tonk, Honky Tonk Woman. And then also like Let It Bleed. I mean, just play it front to back. It's awesome. And it's one of those albums that, and I love going into record stores and finding their cheap bins where it's like, these are records that, maybe there's something wrong with the album cover. Maybe the album cover's missing. That's how I got Rubber Soul from the Beatles. But like, and all of a sudden you find this jackpot where it's like someone came in with their albums that they were so played, like, and that the covers were nasty and everything, that they get put into these cheap, at my local record store, the cheap thrills bin, which they can't charge regular for them because they're so worn, but it's like they've been loved, right? And so I remember I got a bunch of Rolling Stones. One of them was Let It Bleed, and it was, you just kind of amazing. I put it on because I knew some of the songs on it. I'm like, oh, that must be good. And then you just play it, and it's just wonderful, back to back, cover to cover. So there you go. There's the album of the episode. And that's going to wrap it up for this visit to Amidon Planet. Show notes are available at amidonplanet.com/episode 122. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can subscribe, rate, review, and share this episode to help others find this content. You can also subscribe to the email list to receive the Amidon Planet dispatch for teaching resources and updates from Amidon Planet. Also is a great way to get in the mailbag, and that's where we get a couple of responses. You just hit reply, and you can provide some suggestions, comments, or something to the mailbag. So, and that's how you can engage further. Submit a question, comment, or suggestion in the mailbag by sending an email to joel@amidonplanet.com. Still got some stickers out there, so if you do that, send me your mailing address. I can get you an Amidon Planet sticker. So, lastly, I'm always looking to collaborate with those leading others to love through teaching. If you have an event or opportunity, email me at joel@amidonplanet.com or visit amidonplanet.com/about to fill out the request to call form. Thank you for spending time on Amidon Planet. Special thanks to Allison for sharing her time and expertise. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. Finally, thank you to all of you out there learning to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you've been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.